on a quiet morning in March of 1981, inside a crowded courtroom in West Germany. That illusion shattered forever. In just 8 seconds, a grieving mother transformed a courtroom into an execution chamber. Judges dove for cover. Reporters screamed in panic. Gunshots echoed through the halls of justice. And before anyone could react, a man lay dead on the courtroom floor. The killer was not a criminal mastermind, not a gangster, not an assassin. It was a 30-year-old mother, a mother whose 7-year-old daughter had been murdered. But the real mystery is not simply the shooting itself. The real mystery is what happened before it. Because this was not an emotional outburst. It was not a sudden explosion of rage. It was calculated, planned, patient. A broken parent had quietly studied the system, walked through security, smuggled in a loaded pistol, and waited for the perfect moment to kill. And when the smoke cleared, millions of ordinary people supported her. Some even called her a hero. To understand how one mother became the center of the most famous courtroom revenge in modern history, we have to go back to where the nightmare truly began. The year is 1980. The location is the historic northern German city of Lübeck, in what was then West Germany. At the center of this story was a woman named Marion Bachmeier. She was 30 years old, a single mother, and by most accounts, life had never been easy for her. She worked long hours running a small neighborhood pub. The work was exhausting. The money was limited. But Marion endured all of it for one reason. Her daughter, 7-year-old Anna. Anna was energetic, bright, and deeply loved. To Marianne, Anna was more than just her child. She was her entire world. Every late night, every exhausting shift, every sacrifice Marion made was for Anna. Then came May 5th, 1980, a normal spring day that would end in horror. That morning, Anna argued with her mother. It was nothing unusual, the kind of brief disagreement many parents have with young children. Anna wanted something. Marion said no. Upset and frustrated, Anna stormed out of the apartment. She skipped school that day. At 7 years old, she probably thought she was simply escaping for a few hours, trying to cool off after an argument. She walked alone through the familiar streets of her neighborhood. What Anna did not know was that someone was watching her. A man named Klaus Grabowski. To most neighbors, Grabowski appeared ordinary. He was 35 years old, a local butcher, quiet, unremarkable. But behind that ordinary appearance was a deeply disturbing past. Grabowski had already been convicted of violent crimes against children. At one point, he had even undergone chemical castration. But later, he managed to reverse the procedure through hormone treatment. Despite his history, he was free, living among families, walking the same streets as children. And on that afternoon, he crossed paths with Anna. Grabowski approached the little girl with a simple trick. He told her she could come see his cats. For a lonely, upset 7-year-old child, it sounded harmless. Anna followed him home and vanished. Hours passed. Back at home, Marianne's frustration slowly transformed into fear, then panic. Anna had never stayed away this long before. Marianne searched the neighborhood herself. She contacted friends, looked through nearby streets, asked strangers if they had seen her daughter. Eventually, she called the police. A search operation began, but the horrifying truth surfaced far sooner than anyone expected. Klaus Grabowski had a fiancée. That evening, she noticed something deeply unsettling about his behavior. He appeared nervous, agitated, and then she saw something else. A large wooden box, hidden, unexplained. Something felt terribly wrong. Fearing the worst, she contacted police. Officers immediately searched the area near a nearby canal. Hidden among the brush, they found the wooden crate. Inside was the body of 7-year-old Anna. The news devastated Lübeck. Fear spread quickly through the city. Parents were horrified. Neighbors were furious. The local butcher had murdered a child. And now the entire country wanted justice. Grabowski was arrested almost immediately. For a brief moment, people believed the legal system would work exactly as it should. A dangerous predator had been caught. The courts would punish him severely, and Anna's family would finally receive justice. But the trial that followed would push one grieving mother beyond the edge. With Klaus Grabowski now behind bars, the legal process officially began. Months passed as investigators prepared the case. But during that time, something inside Marion Bachmeier slowly changed. Grabowski eventually confessed to the killing, but his defense lawyers immediately began building a strategy. Their goal was simple: reduce his punishment. They focused heavily on his medical history, his past treatments, his hormone therapy, his psychological condition. The defense argued that his mental state had been altered by years of medical procedures. And then, the case took an even darker turn. The defense began attacking the victim herself. 7-year-old Anna. Grabowski claimed the child had tried to blackmail him. According to his story, Anna threatened to tell lies about him unless he gave her money. It was a shocking tactic, one that horrified much of the public. A grown man accused of murdering a child was now trying to shift blame onto the child herself. And every single day, Marion Bachmeier was forced to sit there and listen. She sat only a few feet away from the man who killed her daughter. She listened as lawyers debated technicalities. She listened to the gruesome details of Anna's death. And she listened as her little girl's name was dragged through the courtroom. Day after day, hour after hour, the emotional pressure became unbearable. Slowly, Marion began losing faith in the legal system. She saw loopholes, arguments, delays. She feared the courts were becoming more concerned with understanding the killer than remembering the victim, and eventually, a terrible belief settled into her mind. She became convinced Klaus Grabowski might one day walk free. At some point during the trial, grief stopped being grief and transformed into purpose. Cold, quiet, focused purpose. If the state would not deliver justice for Anna, then Marianne would do it herself. In the early 1980s, courtroom security was far weaker than it is today. No metal detectors, no advanced bag scans, no intensive searches, and a grieving mother in a trench coat did not appear dangerous. At some point before the trial, Marion obtained a Beretta .22 caliber pistol. Small, compact, easy to conceal. She hid it deep inside her purse. Then she waited. March 6, 1981, the third day of the trial. Marion Bachmeier entered the Lübeck District Courthouse like she had done before. Calmly, quietly, she passed security without issue. No one searched her bag carefully. No one suspected anything. Inside the courtroom, she took her usual seat in the third row of the public gallery. Directly ahead sat Klaus Grabowski. Only a short wooden barrier separated them. The room was crowded with judges, lawyers, journalists, and spectators. The atmosphere was tense but orderly. No one noticed Marion resting her hand inside her purse. No one realized she was gripping a loaded pistol. And no one understood that the countdown had already begun. The judge called the courtroom to order. Klaus Grabowski rose from his seat beside his lawyer. He was preparing to address a routine legal matter. Then, Marion Bachmeier stood up. At first, nobody reacted. People nearby assumed she was stretching, or perhaps preparing to leave the room. But instead of walking toward the exit, she reached into her purse and pulled out the Beretta pistol. She raised the weapon, pointed it directly at Klaus Grabowski's back, and fired. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Gunshots thundered through the chamber, one after another. 8 shots in rapid succession. 6 bullets struck Grabowski in the back. Judges dove beneath desks. Reporters screamed and scrambled for cover. Lawyers froze in shock. Within seconds, the man accused of murdering a child collapsed onto the courtroom floor, dead before the legal system could ever finish judging him. Court officers rushed toward Marianne, but there was no struggle, no screaming, no attempt to escape. She calmly surrendered the pistol. Witnesses later said her face showed almost no emotion. As police escorted her from the courtroom, she reportedly spoke a sentence that stunned the nation. "I wanted to kill him, I shot him in the back." The story exploded across West Germany within hours. Newspapers rushed out special editions. Television stations interrupted programming. The image of a courtroom transformed into a crime scene shocked the world. And almost immediately, the public divided into two camps. One side saw Marion Bachmeier as a criminal. To them, her actions represented something deeply dangerous. Because if private citizens begin deciding punishment for themselves, then the rule of law collapses. Courts cannot function if revenge replaces justice. But millions of others saw something entirely different. They saw a mother pushed beyond human limits, parent destroyed by grief, watching a legal system they believed was failing her child. To these supporters, Marion had done what the courts could not. She had guaranteed that Anna's killer would never hurt another child again. Letters flooded in from around the world. Thousands of people sent messages of support. Donations poured into her legal defense fund. To many ordinary citizens, Marion Bachmeier became a symbol of raw human justice. An eye for an eye, but regardless of public sympathy, the state could not ignore what had happened. A man had been executed inside a courtroom, so Marion herself was placed on trial. The irony was impossible to ignore. Now she stood before the exact same legal system she had violently bypassed. Prosecutors argued the killing was clearly premeditated. She had purchased a firearm, hidden it, smuggled it into court, waited patiently, and fired repeatedly into an unarmed man's back. To the prosecution, this was murder, but Marianne's defense team presented a different picture. Not a cold-blooded killer, but a psychologically shattered mother overwhelmed by trauma and grief. A woman whose emotional suffering had reached a breaking point. The trial lasted months. Public debate intensified. And finally, the court delivered its verdict. Marion Bachmeier was not convicted of murder. Instead, she was found guilty of manslaughter and illegal firearm possession. Her sentence, 6 years in prison. But even then, the story was not over. Because of intense public sympathy and worsening health problems, Marion served only 3 years before being released on parole. She walked free, but her life would never truly return to normal again. After prison, Marion Bachmeier struggled to escape the shadow of what happened. The media followed her constantly. Everywhere she went, people recognized her. Some treated her like a hero. Others saw her as a dangerous symbol of vigilante justice. Either way, she could never return to being anonymous. Eventually, Marion left Germany for a quieter life abroad. Far from reporters, far from cameras, far from the endless public attention. But even there, peace remained temporary. In the mid-1990s, doctors diagnosed her with terminal pancreatic cancer. Knowing her time was limited, Marion returned home to Lübeck, the same city where her nightmare had begun 16 years earlier. On September 17, 1996, Marion Bachmeier died at the age of 46. Before her death, she made one final request. She asked to be buried beside her daughter, Anna. The request was granted, and in the end, mother and daughter were finally reunited in the same cemetery. A quiet conclusion to one of the most disturbing and emotionally complicated stories in modern legal history. When people look back on the story of Marion Bachmeier, they are often left with one uncomfortable question. What is justice? The legal system exists to remove emotion from punishment. Without laws, without procedure, without restraint, society risks collapsing into revenge and chaos. But human beings are not machines. And when a parent loses a child, emotion can overpower everything else. Marion Bachmeier traded her own freedom to ensure her daughter's killer would never walk free. To some people, that makes her a criminal. To others, it makes her understandable, maybe even sympathetic. And perhaps that is why this story still unsettles people decades later. Because the line between justice and revenge is often far thinner than we want to believe. Was Marion Bachmeier a cold-blooded killer who violated the foundation of law? Or was she simply a grieving mother, Who did what many desperate parents secretly feel they would do themselves? That question still has no clear answer, and maybe it never will.